The line has to be sung.
I quit. I've never
Hey, you
even
know what you
seen
need
Les
to do
Mis.
for your mic, Daniel? If you look down on the mute icon in the bottom left of Zoom, and then you do the arrow, you
I
can
did.
actually choose
It's not showing.
which microphone.
It's not showing. Dude, but get this.
Nathan, your mic
Huh?
sounds great.
Ooh, extra crispy. What are those, pork rinds?
Oh,
That's some chicharron.
chicharrones.
Sick.
So I'm ready.
Wow.
This is my lunch. Let's do this thing.
Yeah,
All right.
I hate you.
All right, let's do it. I just have a glass of water. I don't even have any food yet.
I don't doubt your ability to make it really noisy.
I know what's the thing on my jacket on that one podcast.
Hey, can we talk
Jeff's-
about how Jeff just rage quit it yesterday?
Oh,
What?
it wasn't a rage quit.
We're like casting all of a
I know,
sudden.
we're-
Jeff is like exits.
G2G. All right, so Daniel, you want to talk about always or never listen to customers?
Well, I actually don't know where sure. Yes. I don't know where I fall. I don't know what I believe. I'm confused.
Nathan, is he kind of glitching for you, or is that just for me?
No, he was a little bit stuttery, but
Glitchy?
keep going.
All right, so what's the question?
Should you listen to users or not?
Well, duh, yes.
Yes.
I actually don't believe in that. I don't believe in it.
What do you
There's
give us some
something-
context?
Yeah,
Like,
go on.
There's some times when you shouldn't listen to customers. And I just don't know when that is. I don't know when you should not listen to customers. You know?
okay, like when? Do you have some examples of times you think it's not a good idea?
Like the freaking startup times, right? Like wow.
Dude, what's wrong with you? Oh my god. What the heck?
What is happening? Do we need to call an ambulance?
Jeez.
An ambulam?
Intubate that man.
So
Dude, what? Do you need us to call you back in 20 minutes?
okay, I'm ready now.
Oh my gosh. I feel
So
like I'm
every
in the
time-
ICU right now.
Every time we did a company, the whole time I felt like every time we tried to listen to customers, it actually just was way worse. Every
Dude.
single time.
That's because we didn't actually build anything usable. Like they weren't actually using our product. We weren't listening to customers. We were listening to like random people and we were asking them their opinions on some product we might build in the future that was completely unstructured. The times that we actually had real users, like when we first built Spring Slide, right? And we had that feedback form in the top. Remember what I'm talking about? People told us exactly what they wanted. It was so easy. They're just like, I need to be able to upload files. Okay. And then we looked through the feedback. It's like 70% of people are trying to upload, want to be able to upload files. Duh, build that. Why would you not build that? But before that, before they started actually using the product, that's when it was useless. Remember when we were going around and we were like, hey, we have this huge, long physical linear calendar. It's 6 feet long. How are we going to turn this into a digital product? And everyone was like, I don't know, like make it scroll really far. Dude, they just didn't care. It's less that they don't, it's like they don't know and they don't care at a certain point. And then it tips, right? Once they start using the product and like they're personally invested, then they start having opinions about it because they're using it. Like they know what they want at that point. Before that, they don't know what they want.
So you should never listen to customers before they have something to try. Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily. It's just that I don't know, dude. It's kind of like it's almost like let's say you're building a house, right? Let's say you're going to build a new house, which both of you are actually considering at the moment, right?
Sure.
So it would basically be like you guys asking me right now, like what color your like backsplash should be in your kitchen. It's like, dude, I don't know. You don't even have anything close to a house yet. Like I'm just going to totally just dole out wild guesses. And I don't care. I have nothing to like structure that question around, So it's just like the useless you're going to get from me is like, I'm sorry, the feedback you're going to get from me is useless. at that point, right? Versus if you walk into a house and it's already painted, and you have some decor, and you kind of have like your vibe set up, and then you ask a question like that, then it's way easier to have an opinion at that point.
Yeah, this goes back actually to like PMs are just there to maintain a status quo, really, right? We're like,
yeah,
the founder built the dang house, and the PM is talking about the backsplash color.
Totally.
You
Dude,
know?
also, another thing I was thinking this week, the point at which you hire a PM is the point at which you no longer really care what happens.
Yeah, you did it.
Like,
you made it.
You've gotten so far along that you're really super confident that like no one's gonna be able to screw it up at this point.
Yeah, nobody can mess it up.
Yeah, so then you're like, okay, now I'll hire someone to make some minute little decisions that won't really have any impact at all.
Yeah, hopefully, all together, sure, it leads us to a better place, but just like optimize the onboarding flow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Increase retention by 0.02%, please.
We haven't implemented a forgot password functionality.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Totally.
Back to the customers though, I think I don't have a hard line of when or like a science behind it, but there are certain situations where I think the customers know directionally what they want, but they don't actually know what specific feature they want.
Your voice sounds so good. Dude, you almost sound like Optimus Prime right now.
Keep talking, Nathan.
Yeah.
Optimus Prime?
Optimus Prime.
Just keep talking.
Transformers. He has the coolest voice of anything I've ever heard.
Well, thanks.
Okay.
Anyway. Microphone, Amazon, $90.
Sweet.
Comes with a cool stand. Check it out.
Cool.
I don't know. I think sometimes customers they don't know exactly what they want, but they know kind of like the functionality. It's like the jobs to be done thing, which I think everybody comes back to eventually, but they know kind of what they need, but they don't know the exact feature that they want.
Dude, yeah, I think we talked to someone. I vaguely remember someone telling us, or maybe we came up with that, I don't know. But basically, like, customers are not the creators. They give you purely like reactionary directional feedback. They don't give you feedback that helps you create something brand new necessarily. They just like, as they're using the thing, they're like, oh, dang, I wish it did this. They're reacting to what's already been built.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think there's situations where they could be like, hey, you need to build this thing. And then you look at it and it's like, no, you don't actually want that thing. You want something that's going to solve that problem, but it's not solution A, it's actually solution B.
Yeah. Dude, but Daniel, like in your case at Duolingo, I would assume that you'd be listening to customers a lot.
So, no, we are. But here's the thing. So wait, backing up a little. So let's say you're about to build Duolingo. Duolingo doesn't exist. You're about to build it. What you're saying is, don't talk to users.
If it doesn't exist yet?
No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't exist. This is like 7 years ago, whatever.
Dude, like, no. In fact, absolutely not. We did this, right? We did the whole lean startup like BS process. It's such a joke. It's not lean at all. It's not like, it works once you have customers. Yeah, it's such a heavy, long, difficult process to undertake. And it works like right now, would I do the lean startup? Absolutely. But that's because we already have customers. We have a product.
For your job,
yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. Once you have a product and you have customers and stuff, then it's so easy. Honestly, you don't even have to try. Like, people are going to find you and tell you what they want, right? Even if you're not asking for it, like, they will find your email address. They'll find you and tell you what they want. So it gets so easy at that point. Like, of course you're going to listen to your customers. Well, you'd be stupid not to. But in the beginning, when you're just like sitting in your garage and you're like, what should I build? Like, and it's not structured at all at that point. No, I don't think you should in most cases. I mean, sure, there are cases where you should. Like, if you're building a product for someone who actually knows exactly what they want, listen to them. Dude, but like, if you're just coming out of the gate, you came up with the idea, and then you're gonna ask someone else what it should be. Like, no.
Yeah, dude. Okay, I 100% agree with you. Fun fact: we did this. In regards to like listen to users, we just did this like a UX research, and I did a detractor study. So people who like hate on Duolingo publicly. So we looked at some random social media platforms, like I think Twitter was one of them. And we just pulled like from the last like 6 months or something like that, like who are all the people that hated on Duolingo. And then I categorized it all to figure out what the heck they're talking about. And it was like so obvious. It's like half of all complaints are like on this one particular course. And we know exactly why. Half of all complaints in the past 6 months was for this one small course, right? So it was like so obvious what to do next. And at that point, we were lucky enough that we were kind of already working on it, and they just launched this feature that was like mind-blowingly amazing. Like metrics are up. It was like so clear, right? But here, and when you're building a new company, it makes sense, right? Like it's just like, why would you talk, like they have no idea what you're even talking about, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have customers, so you might be listening to the wrong people by just talking to random people, right? Now here's like the muddy area, I guess, the gray area. What about like new features? You're like in a company that already exists, and you're building a new feature that has still related to the product, but it has like nothing to do with kind of the core experience. At that point, is it worth talking to users or not? Let's say, for example, here's an example. Let's say that Duolingo wants to do like live tutoring, right? Where there's like people, or you pay people to kind of give you instructions via Zoom, like via video conference in your phone. Like, at that point, is it worth talking to users before you build anything or not?
Dude, if it were me in that position, honestly, I would ask the users what they think, and then I would decide if their feedback is useful or not. Because I don't know, maybe some of them are really opinionated about that, and they have some useful feedback. The benefit is, at a point like that at a company, it almost feels like a startup in that it's like a brand new thing, but it's not a startup at all, in the sense that you have millions of users. You can, with a snap of a finger, basically, you could probably get like 10,000 pieces of feedback about that feature. Just send one email survey, right? So you can. That's a really easy thing to test. Like, just get the feedback and then read it and see if it's useful.
Yeah, and it's usually not expensive either. Like, why would you not try it out?
Yeah, it's so easy.
Dude,
like, I would.
Who are we to determine if something is useful or not, right? You might have like all these people looking at the feedback and they're like, wow, we should definitely listen to this because nobody wants this. Or like people are concerned, or like, how do you know if it's useful or not? It's just kind of like a gut feeling.
Well, dude, so here's this doesn't like directly answer your question, but something I was thinking when you were talking about the survey you did with people that hate, the detractor survey, people that didn't like Duolingo. Every time I've gone into a company, it's been really interesting to me to see the backlog. It's like, before you started a company, you're like looking at the product, you're trying to get prepared for like, to have some opinions about what it is you're going to be working on. And I always develop opinions. It's like, oh man, they're really missing this feature, or that thing would be way better if they whatever. You walk into a company, right? And you're like, hey, have you guys thought about it? And they're like, yes, we thought about that 5 years ago. Look at our backlog. It's like number 258 on the backlog, right? Like, every idea that anyone has ever had about the product, the company is aware of, and they've been aware of for years, and it's all in a backlog. There's just like hundreds of items already in that backlog. So it's almost like customer feedback is not necessarily about generating new ideas. It's just about prioritizing the backlog. It's like, you already know, right? Like, how many times does a customer give you a piece of feedback that's truly new, where like no one in the company had thought of that thing before, and you're like, oh wow, we didn't think of that, we should totally do that, versus it's like, oh yeah, well, we've been kicking that idea around for years now, but we didn't realize it was such a priority until you told us it is, and now we'll build it. So maybe customer feedback is less about like generating, again, it's less about creation and it's more directional. It's more about just prioritizing the stuff everyone already knew about.
I think that comes back to like being data informed versus data driven. And I hate when companies say they're data driven, because like, if you're just purely data driven, you're going to just do whatever the customers say, and you're probably going to have not a good product in the end. But like, for example, the newsfeed in Facebook, when they first rolled that out, everybody hated it. And there's like a video of the product owner who was talking about it. And he was like, yeah, it was not good, but we knew strategically it was the direction we wanted to go, because it opened up all these other avenues. So if they had just listened to the data, they would have never rolled out the newsfeed, because nobody liked it at first. But now it's like their core feature. And so they were data driven, or they were data informed, not data driven. And I think that's important, because like, you're collecting the data and it's important to know like what people are saying, but like, I don't think it has to dictate your decisions. You need to consider like, how does this fit in strategically? How does it fit in operationally? How does it fit in with the other items we're looking at? So, yeah.
Dude, I would say for that example, Daniel, where you're building a new, like a live tutoring thing, it would be more valuable to go after users of current live tutoring, services, and see what they want, instead of people who don't use live tutoring, right? And like get their opinions on live tutoring. Like, they don't know.
But wouldn't that be similar to like you're doing a startup, right? Let's say you do a startup with doing live tutoring.
Yeah.
So should you go talk to people about live tutoring before you build anything, or because it's a startup you don't talk to them?
Well, it depends on the impetus for the startup. Like if you had some idea where you're like, oh dang, I'm just building this for me, like because I want it, then maybe not.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
But if you're going a purely like almost like a mercenary play where you're just like, hey, I'm just gonna go find something that works and compete, right? In that case, yeah, it would be really smart to go talk to people who already use similar products and figure out how you can make yours better.
And that's not always a bad way to do things. Like,
No.
could be the right answer for a lot of companies.
You can do this. It's a really easy thing to do with, like, you get on Amazon, for example, and you can look at some products and just read through the customer reviews. And like, in some cases, it's really obvious, like how you can make a better version, a slightly better version of that product, you know, because people are just like already talking about it. So in a case like that, where you're picking something people are already buying, you're just going to compete, and you don't necessarily have the insights, then yeah, I personally would absolutely go that route. Like, let's just go out there and find. I mean, it's similar to the process you would undertake if you're trying to improve your own product. You know, it's like, let's just go talk to people about what they like and don't like about this, and build a better version of it.
Dude, but one thing to clarify, and I think we talked about this in another cast, but it drives me crazy when people say, "Oh, I talked to 4 users, and here's what they want. We should really build this." Right? I think it was it yesterday we were talking about this?
Maybe.
We're like, really knowing what users want doesn't mean that you need to talk to them in person necessarily. I think it's a good component, right? But knowing what users want, that information can come in many different ways, right? For example, you talk about Amazon reviews. You can look at like your like Zendesk tickets. You can send surveys. You can also just, if you're your own user, you can use that as a source of information. You look at data, right? If you see how people are behaving, you don't necessarily even talk to them. You're like, oh my gosh, 90% of people are dropping off here, right? Maybe why, you can look into it. Maybe there's something obvious, but the obsession of like finding truth is something I feel like a lot of PMs lack, right? Where they're like, they go through the motions, they get like 3 little pieces of feedback and they're like, oh, yes, this is my roadmap for next year. And you're like, dude, are you convinced that that's actual truth? Are you convinced that that's representative of what's happening? And are you convinced that we should do this for the next 12 months?
I don't think as a PM or a founder or somebody in charge of a product, I don't think it's your job to simply take the feedback from users and immediately put it into the product. I think it's your job to know what they're saying and to collect all the information and then make a decision. But it's not your role simply to just translate exactly what people are saying into features, because like anybody can do that. But your role is to think strategically. It's to uncover the truth. And sometimes you might do something that, again, the users don't like right away because it's a strategic fit for you, like Facebook in the newsfeed. Like, I don't know. It's not your role to just simply take all that information and put it in the product. It's your role to like think through it all, collect it all, and then make an informed decision.
Yeah,
that could completely ignore it.
I agree, but like I've seen it happen so many times in my career where they're like, seriously, they're like 10 responses, they look at 2 of them, and they make conclusions that aren't even what those 2 pieces of feedback are even saying, you know? And then it's like pushing to like work on this thing for the next like 2 months, you know? And it's like, dude, it's not. This is why, like, when people actually get me like, and they say, here's a report, we did this research, here's what we learned. Very rarely I actually trust that report. Like almost always I ask for the raw data. Like I just want to see what they actually said. And then 9 times out of 10, turns out like I have a very different take on what they said than what people are pushing for, you know? It's kind of, you know what it reminds me of? It's we had Jeff and I think you might have met him too, Nathan, I don't know. We had a friend and he was a research assistant for a professor in a business school. And he was writing books. And what the professor said is like, hey, John, I'm going to call him John, I need you to go do all this research that shows that my hypothesis is true. Just find cases so I can put it in my book. And then he spent all this time trying to find out all these cases, right? Because this guy was already convinced that this is a sexy hypothesis. It works. I have everything figured out how I'm going to write it. I just need some examples of companies that follow this pattern. So yeah, if you go find data that kind of proves your point, you're going to find it, right? But that doesn't mean that it's like a good hypothesis.
So do you feel like these people are coming into it already like with an idea of what they want to build, or why does this happen?
I don't know. I think they just like legitimately, a lot of people are just legitimately bad at really digesting information, right? Where like someone mentions something and in their mind, they're already thinking about how that would turn into this different feature. And like, oh my gosh, they're right. We got to solve it. And we got to solve it now. And then run an A/B test and does nothing, you know, because it turns out like actually nobody cares. Or There are people who mention it like they don't really care that much. It's just like, oh, I'm just talking out loud, you know.
Dude, I think maybe a cause of this kind of behavior is just a lack of, actually it kind of touching on OKRs, like it's a lack of an objective, like an overarching goal to kind of like put this feedback against, you know, because if you're just like randomly looking through feedback, just basically looking for the next thing to build, but without any sort of direction, like we're trying to solve X problem, then I think that happens more in that case. Versus if you start with a really specific problem, like we're going to try to whatever, improve retention or improve sales or something, you know, then you filter everything through that thought process.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot more clear what to do, I think.
Totally.
I'm kind of in that position right now, actually, where like I don't actually have an objective, that we don't do OKRs, the company I'm at. And what's ironic is like now I kind of want OKRs. I wish I had some OKRs. Because everything,
that's number 2.
everything right now is really reactionary to me. Like maybe I just like haven't figured out what the priorities are yet because I'm really new there. But it's just like, hey, like I don't even know how this stuff gets bubbled to the top, honestly. But something will just come to me like, hey, we need to work on this feature next, and it's just like, you know, PM it, and I'm just like, okay. Like I don't even know, like I would have no clue, basically, not no clue, but like a really fuzzy idea of how to propose a new feature, because I just don't know what we're trying to achieve aside from like GMV growth. But yeah, so if I did have a really specific idea though, then it gets super easy for me. Then you just go through the standard PM process, right? It's like, okay, we're trying to solve this problem. Let's go ask the customers why this thing isn't currently happening. They give us their feedback, we rank it, you wind up with a list of like 8 things, and you know exactly what to do to solve those problems. But
dude, we should talk about that situation when we were at a certain e-commerce platform. And what we did, that was like, I thought that was probably one of the best PMing I've done in my career.
Dude, I do too. And I can't understand. Well, at Lucid, you did something similar.
Oh, at Lucid I did. I've done it a few times, but that was very well done. So that was very clear to us, right? It started with this, right? So it started with a clear objective. It's like, hey, we have an issue basically with retention. Like people who are signing up in the most recent years are spending less money over time compared to those who signed up before. And we looked at like revenue per yearly cohort, and it was obvious that there was a retention problem, right? So then, I can't remember what we did next. What did we do next?
Okay, so the next thing we did was we were like, okay, well, the big question then is, why are people leaving? That's the only question to answer, basically. Why are people leaving? And that generated a research project for us. So the company, and what's interesting about this is the company had done surveys before. This goes back to your point, and I totally agree with you that like, I rarely trust the data that like people just hand me, because the company had done surveys before on retention, and they had all these ideas about like why people were leaving. But when we looked at the survey, dude, anyway, it just like, it was not convincing at all, because they had, for example, like a bunch of multiple choice questions where they have like 5 options. And the question is like, why
shipping?
Yeah, why do you not use this product anymore? And then it's just like, yeah, shipping, whatever. And then, so, you know, out of those 5 options, we get a ranking of which is number 1, but like, it could have been, we have no idea what it could be. It could have been something that was just not on that list, right? And like, so that felt sketchy. So anyway, we redid the research, and but what we wanted to do was ask the people that had left why they left. But the thing is, they hated the company at this point, so they're not answering any emails, right? The company, I think, had already tried to reach out to them, and to no avail, really. Like, they didn't really get anything useful out of it. So Daniel wrote this script. I think like one of the 2 of us generated a list of all the like lost customers, you know.
So it was like people who sign up and who made purchases for like 12 months and then they stopped. Basically.
Yeah, and they hadn't made a purchase for another 12 months. So they were like dead and gone. And some of these people, like there was one woman I remember who had made a purchase on average, I think it was every 5 days for 2 years straight.
And then
every
stopped.
5 days, and then just nothing for a year, right? Up until that present day. So then Daniel wrote a script that passed all those customers into our customer support system and just pulled out all of the support tickets that they had generated. So from there, we had like thousands of support tickets where we could read the last thing they said to us before they just disappeared. It was kind of awesome. It was like being in Lord of the Rings and like reading that book when they're in the dungeon of like the last thing that guy says is he's like
black box on an airplane.
It was pretty sweet. Wow.
It was
and
awesome.
We had this massive spreadsheet, and that's when we're like, okay, then we read detail. We just went through all of them and read it. in this process took a while. It wasn't like a few hours. Took a
Well,
few weeks, I thought.
Yeah, we had like a few hundred or 1,000 tickets to read through. So we read through the first probably like, I don't know, 400. And but honestly, you don't really need to. Like after reading through probably the first 50 or so, like you get a sense of what's going on. It's
It
like,
was
well, I'm saying
so
the same.
obvious.
I'm seeing the word refund a lot here, right? Like, and et cetera. Like there are other reasons, shipping costs, whatever. And so, yeah, it becomes really obvious really quickly. And from there, we just built a little in the Excel sheet that said like, hey, if you see the word refund in any of these, right, all thousands of them, then just like count it up. So then we just had a tally of like, of the 8,000 customer support tickets, 80 or whatever, 60% of them are talking about refunds, 30% are talking about shipping costs, et cetera. And there were probably like 5 or 6 big issues, and knew exactly what the issues are. And we knew the ranking of them because you could rank it in a lot of ways. Like you could rank it just by the number of support tickets that mentioned that thing, or you could also tie in how much money those people spent and use like a, LTV or like GMV kind of weighting system. Anyway, regardless, like we knew exactly what the problems were and we knew exactly in what order they should be solved. And then we just started knocking them out.
It was so clean. And then after that,
Yeah.
because I remember like up to that point, like everyone in the company saw this product as like, hey, we're a website and that's the product. And we have to optimize and make it awesome, make it clean, change the design and all that stuff. But in reality, the real product was what people were getting in their doors like a few days later, right?
Yeah,
That's really
like,
what the real product was. And nobody
Yeah.
was even looking at that,
Because that took into account a lot of things like shipping times, right? Like how long does it take you to get your thing? And like we didn't actually have any control over that,
They
but
didn't
that's a
even
huge
care.
part of the experience.
Yeah.
Like we can't change the website and change your shipping time, but like if you order something on an e-commerce site and then you don't get it for like 5 weeks, like you're not going to be happy about that, right? So we had to, anyway.
And then that's when we dove into the numbers and we figure out what is the average shipping time, what percentage of sellers ship late, like the percentage refund and all that stuff. And then we decided to create all this kind of metrics to keep the sellers kind of on their
Accountable.
feet, right? Accountable. So we're like, hey, we're reporting to all this like 4 or 5 key metrics about how you're doing. And just the fact that we reported to them, even though we weren't showing anything to users at that point, just the fact that we start showing those metrics to the sellers, they immediately start like decreasing all those times and start optimizing for. And you can see like in the numbers, like percentages order the ship late just like dropped after we implemented that feature, or like average shipping time decrease, or percentage of products that ship with free shipping like increase, right? So it was just so clear. And then we like moved into like adding to the clients. Basically, that created the roadmap for like a year and a half, if I'm not wrong, right?
Oh yeah, it was tons of work. Honestly.
It was awesome.
And it was at least if you cared about retention, like it was definitely the right work to do. And everything that came out of it, I mean, we were obviously tracking and everything was successful. Like there were no busts in that project. Everything anyway, everything kind of works. And what's interesting about it is like the hard part of that process is just getting the data. Once you have all that information, once you've asked the right question, gathered the right information, and kind of like grouped it correctly, it's so obvious. After that point, like anyone could do the job really well because you know exactly what the problems are. Once you know what the problems are, in a lot of cases, the solutions are really obvious. It's like, oh, look, 60% of people had a major issue with trying to just get a refund on a product. Well, what should we do? We didn't have a refund process at the time. So it's like, we should probably have a refund process.
No, yeah, like people complain about the refund process and how painful it was. And we're like, what is a refund process? Didn't we try to like actually get a refund or something? And we like documented the whole thing. We're like, oh my gosh, it's a pain in the butt. So we just built a refund process and it was like glorious.
Yeah, dude, so I did the same exact thing at the last true startup I was at, where I was actually like a founder and we had no money and it was just getting our butts kicked again. But this was like, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe. So I got there, and when I got there were 3 other guys that had started the company a couple of months before I joined, and they were like, hey, what we really need right now is we just need to increase revenue. And it's like, okay, like that's hard, right? Especially for a PM. But that was the challenge. And so I just did exactly the same thing. I just reached out to customers and I was like, hey, what do you like about this thing? What don't you like about it? How can we improve it? And it was at the time the company was only selling 1 product per day. That was like the thing. That was like the differentiator. Like we're gonna be a super simplified e-commerce platform and only sell 1 thing a day to men, because men don't like to shop anyway. So it'll just be this really quick in and out kind of process, Anyway, I reached out to the customers and I'm like, hey, what do we need to change to get you guys to spend more money? And they just told me, And so, and then we just did it. The biggest thing on that list was we want to see more products than just one per day, which is like probably pretty obvious to everyone, but it was not obvious to the company. And like, it took a lot of convincing to get everyone to actually do that. But once we did it, we were just doing like a few $1,000s a month in revenue, but literally like the second we released that change where we just increased the number of products we had, our revenue quadrupled. Overnight quadrupled. We were just like banging around down at the bottom of the graph, you know, and then we released that feature and then boom, for the next whatever eternity, the revenue was 4 times that. Easy. It's easy as long as you like have a really specific direction. If you know what question to ask and if you can get a good answer to it, then like.
And then what happened to your startup?
Well, so here's like the footnote. The footnote to that story is we were actually, because it was a startup, we didn't have good deals lined up for most of the products. So we were actually losing money on most of the things we sold. And the theory was that if we increase revenue dramatically, we'll be able to get better deals on these products, right? So I basically, so we increased revenue 4 times, but what that also did was increase our costs 4x. So it took our runway and just chopped it down to a fourth of what it was, because now we were making money at 4 times the rate, but also spending money at 4 times the rate. And we just, even at the higher revenue number, like we couldn't line up the right deals and stuff. And so it just killed us faster.
So moral of the story is make sure you don't sell for negative dollars.
Yeah, definitely.
No, but that's
my second startup.
The PM. You guys did the PM process.
What's that?
You guys did it. Your PMs.
Yeah, but again, it is all because like the raw data that you got was pure. Like it was actually legitimately good data.
Straight from the customer. I honestly, I don't trust anything that's not straight out of the customer's mouth. Any level of interpretation at all makes me nervous.
Dude, yes. So when I was at Dropbox, the way they had it all set up was they had this group of UX researchers that had a lab, and they would just kind of work on this different part of the building, had a lab on the first floor, and they would always have customers go in there and they would write this report and send it to us like once a week or every other week about like, hey, here's what customers want. And I never trusted that thing. But the problem was like a lot of people actually made decisions based off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that they're bad UX researchers, right? But it's just different, right? When you're just talking to users and getting insights, like it's just very different than we're like, hey, we're trying to increase revenue, or we're trying to like increase retention from this previous cohorts. What exactly is happening? And the type of users that you reach out to and the type of questions you ask is completely different than just like, oh, we got like 10 people in the building and we talked to them and here's what they want, you know?
Yeah, totally. Because dude, you don't know if they sent out a multiple choice survey where they had a fixed set of options.
And guarantee you they did. They all do. They have this screening thing, and they all do. And the reason why is because nobody actually wants to look at the data. If you just kind of open it up, it takes an hour to read through it. So nobody wants to do it. You know, they just want something that they can create a graph real quick and that's it.
Yep. And dude, with a multiple choice question, like the graph gets created by the survey tool. It's like the easiest thing ever. But yeah, the problem with that is like, you don't know if the number one thing wasn't in that set. Maybe you're asking about numbers like 14, 15, 16, and 17, you know?
I feel like in general, this is like good life advice, which is like, don't just immediately believe whatever people tell you the data says. You know, as we're thinking through like all the crazy stuff happening with elections, like it's easy to manipulate responses.
There we go. Nathan getting all conspiratorial on us.
No, not taking any side on this. I'm just saying, hey,
worth it. Good job, people.
Yeah.
Just take everything with a grain of salt, because I don't know, unless you're looking at the actual data, like who knows?
Dude, the thing, and the thing we did at that company we talked about that I feel like really, once we got to the point where we needed to get approval for that project where we were working on retention, Daniel and I, we were really convicted. We were like, okay, we know what's going on. How do we now convince everyone else that that's true, right? Like, how do we convince them that what we're saying is true? And so what we did was we had our like ranking of issues. We're like, hey, okay, so we did this study. Here are the issues and here's the ranking. So refunds are at the top, et cetera, right? But then we delved into each one of those, and we also provided like a few snippets of examples of what customers said. So we're like, okay, now let's talk about refunds for a second. We're like, this is, 60% of the feedback talked about refunds, and here's some of the things people said. And we went through a few of those examples. And dude, I feel like that's the moment that drove it home. I feel like before that, when we were just talking about the graphs, like people like don't even really know what you're talking about. You can't really like feel it, but once you start reading through the story of some irate customer who's like, I bought this thing 6 weeks ago, I'm just trying to return it. You guys sent me on this crazy, goose chase. I've been, it's been like an email chain, 14 emails long. The thing finally showed up at my house. Now I was just trying to cancel the order initially. Now I have to actually send it back. You guys are charging me for shipping here and shipping back and blah, 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 blah. Right. You like read through those stories and you're just like, man,
and immediately it clicked. Like, we got to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe that's all that would be required. Like, you can still post graphs and stuff, but like just include some context too. Like help us like connect with these people and their problem and like see a little more of it,
That's the most powerful thing. You show them like raw data, 50% of people, 80% of people are talking about this. Here's like 3 quotes. Here's like 3 scenarios. It just like nails it.
Dude, because at least my interpretation of it was during that meeting, we were pitching it to the executives like, hey, here's our roadmap basically. And when we were going through the graphs and stuff, they were like mildly interested. It seemed like they were like, okay, this is interesting. Dude, as soon as we showed them those snippets, those like quotes from the customers, the whole mood of the room changed. And it was immediately just like instant buy-in. Basically,
they were fired up.
From that point forward, it was like, oh my gosh, we've got to do this. It went from like, this is kind of interesting to like, this is a major problem.
Yeah. Oh, it was so awesome.
But dude, you only get that if you're reading if you're talking to, or reading the feedback from the customer themselves, not like somebody else's interpretation of it. I'm all for that. I'm a huge proponent. I honestly don't even know how else to do PM stuff. I don't even know how else to do it. Like, that's the only process that I know of. It's like, define a problem, ask the customers why it's a problem for them and how we can solve it, and then solve it.
Well, so here's a different scenario. I follow like slightly different process actually. So when I joined Lucid Software, the diagram software, they had spent like a year or so rebuilding the whole editor where you diagram, right? And I go in and like it was losing. Like, the editor was losing. Everything was just not going really well. Nothing was going really well. And
losing, like it was performing worse than the previous version, right?
Yeah, they were running A/B tests and like it was just losing on all metrics. Revenue was down, retention was down. Certain metrics that we care about were all down, right? And I just kind of inherited and we're like, okay, Daniel, you're gonna take this on. And it took me like 6 months or so to kind of make it win. But there's a few parts where I actually claim that I actually listened to users, even though I never actually talked to one of them. I did talk to them at some point, but not in this scenario. So here's one. This is the one that actually made us win. So we could not figure it out for my life, dude. We had this thing where like I got it to the point where the A/B test was winning, right? Like, it was kind of up to par. I think some metrics were up, retention was higher, revenue was about the same. But the one metric we could not win was people sharing their diagrams. That metric was down. And if you look at both the old design and new design, it was like, oh my gosh, like that should not go down, right? Like, it was like, oh, maybe the color, change the color, right? We're like, let's make it look identical to how it was before. And we still couldn't make it like win or be the same. And what turns out, they had created this new feature called Feature Find. They had some binoculars. So when you press it and you're like, oh, I want to find an arrow, and you type arrow, press enter, and it just adds an arrow basically. Or like, oh, I want to print, you put whatever, you can type anything and it just finds it for you. And it's awesome, right?
Searches for the feature you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, like we try to move to the left and all that stuff, nothing would do it. And then I look at the data into like, what are people actually searching there? And I looked at all the queries of people, what they were searching for. And what they were searching for was print or download. And that was about like, I can't remember, it was like 60% of all queries for that was about like download a document. And then it just kind of clicked on me, like the sharing a document versus downloading it is probably competing events, right? Where like if I download this, it's probably because I'm going to download it, I'm going to send it to you via email, I'm going to send it to my boss, or I can just click share and have you invite to the diagram. And once we do that, it's like, oh my gosh, I think we run a test where we hit it or something like that.
Wait.
We hit.
So
like,
what did you change?
This new feature that they had implemented just on the new editor, that was the feature find.
Oh yeah.
Basically, we just removed it. And once we removed it, shares just like skyrocketed again.
Really?
Yeah. And then we figured out a way to kind of keep it there while keeping like shares up, right? But it was like so clean. You just look at the data and like, what are people searching for it? And that was like, that's the problem. Is like we created a feature that competes with shares, and that's what we couldn't win for like a year, you know?
Yeah.
But that's one where like I never really talked to a user, right? Like I actually did talk to users, but nobody even mentioned this, right? But it wasn't until like I actually looked at the data and it's like, okay, what's different? This is different. What are people searching? And it's like so obvious in what's happening.
Yeah. But I mean, arguably, that is still talking to users, right? Like you're getting your information from the user, or you're like observing their
Yes.
behavior, I guess. But
Yeah.
like,
But
it's
that's
the
my
important
point.
part. Yeah.
It's like you can talk to, like, for example, when we were working at the Summit e-commerce platform, I don't think we ever even had an interview with a user.
We did. I don't know if you had left by that point, but we started having them like every Friday or every other Friday or something.
Okay, but that's after the roadmap was set, right?
Yeah, it wasn't that helpful, honestly. It wasn't
Yeah.
helpful at all, because the thing is, like, it's one person that walks into your office, or 3 people or whatever, and they give you some feedback, and it's like, okay, that's what 3 people said, but we have thousands of people to consider. So like,
No, and this is the thing, is like, that's what, like, I like the objective, like, what are you trying to accomplish, and what is the best way you can actually see what's actually happening. And
Right.
sometimes that is talking to users, sometimes it's looking at the data, sometimes it's trying it yourself. Like, just try to get that data that will help you understand what's happening, right? It doesn't necessarily have to default into like, hey, I'm going to talk to 5 people randomly and just that's my lineup for the next 12 months.
Mhm.
That's what just drives me crazy. There's like zero intellectual honesty.
because is that because the data set's just too small, basically?
Not really. It's just like the way I see it is like user interviews are a tool,
Mhm.
right? But you also have a lot of different tools that you can see what's happening from the users, right? And
Yeah.
like, I don't like, if I'm going to have a bowl of cereal, I don't use a fork, you know? Just use the tool that will help you get the data, the most accurate piece of information. And yeah, sometimes you need to have like multiple tools. And I think most of the time you should talk to users in real life and supplement that with something else. But just defaulting to like, hey, I have this question. Oh, I talked to 5 users and it's like, you're validated, PM. Great job. Now I trust you. It's like
Mhm.
such BS, right? Because I can just tell they're going through the motions, you know?
Yeah.
And like everyone's just loving like UX research and it's like so trendy right now. And guess what? I really believe in it. But the fact that people are not being intellectually honest in regards to how they're getting this data is what drives me crazy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm.
I've said
I
it.
concur. I totally agree. I don't. Yeah. Totally agree. It seems so obvious. Like, I honestly, I don't even know what else to say about it. It seems so obvious, but it's so rare.
What seems obvious? The fact that you need to talk to customers or do research?
Yeah, to go through the process, to like, you know, like, I don't know, to ask the right question and then get enough information, enough of the right kind of information to be able to answer that question with a high level of confidence.
Yeah, I just don't know if everybody's good at it. I don't know if I'm good at it. It's like, how do you objectively say somebody's good at doing that kind of question asking and probing?
Well, give us an example of last time you did this. We'll grade you.
Wait. What's our scale? 0 to 10? 11 point or what?
Yeah, chickens per
Okay.
month.
0 to 10.
Chickens per month.
Go for it.
Yeah, I don't know.
And after that, I gotta go. Go for it.
What?
Go through your example and we'll grade you and then we'll wrap it up.
I don't know what you want as an example.
You haven't done this ever?
What? Talk to
0.
customers?
0.
Yeah, when was the last time you had like a specific question or problem you were trying to solve and you didn't know the answer? And then how did you find the answer?
Yeah, so this is not the last time, but this is a while back. Thinking about Lucid again is like, you know, Lucid Press was not getting super great reviews. It's like, okay, let's find out why. Well, we went and we looked at all the reviews people were leaving on it and then put them together. Like you said, hey, here's all the qualitative answers that we have. Go through them. It's like everybody's talking about the image manager. It sucks. The images aren't good. So we fixed that and like, look, now our reviews are doing better. Okay, rate me. Scale
8.
1 to chickens per day.
8.
Yeah, I'd rate that at least like 17 chickens per month. That was pretty
Here's an
good.
interesting example though, is like working on the docs list at Lucid. Nobody was saying, hey, templates are bad, but that was the whole direction for redoing the docs list. at least on LucidPress, was like, hey, we need to make template finding better. But nobody was talking about that because they didn't know it existed. So we were talking to customers and we were observing that, like, hey, they were using the docs list as it was to organize their documents in a template-like fashion, but they weren't saying, hey, you need to make templates better, because it just wasn't something that really existed very well. But by observation, seeing them use that, I'm like, hey, I think we need to think about this in a different paradigm. Like, it needs to be a template and not just like a locked document. And so that kind of spurred like the whole redesign of LucidPress and ultimately Lucid Docs List Total. But it's interesting because like there wasn't anybody saying, hey, you need to build this. It was just like, hey, I'm observing them doing something that was painful and then drawing my own conclusions from it. So
that was a good redesign, by the way. That was a big win, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, it was a big win.
Dude, the other one was like, do you remember, Jeff, when I had you sit down in the tiny little room for like 4 hours to design
the print?
Yeah. So the way it came to pass is like I looked at like percentage of users that print. Turns out like a huge amount of users of Lucid's of the diagram software, they print their documents, like actually print it on a piece of paper. And then I like looked at the printing process, and it was like such a mess. So I never talked to users, but it was such a mess. And like even the fact that so many people did it, I was like, why don't we just make this better? And then I had Jeff sit down with me for like 4 hours. He was so miserable. I've never seen him be so bored out of his mind. You were like, seriously, your eyes were like just glazing around. It was so bad. And then we built that for 4 hours. And then that gave the engineering team work for like the next like 2 months. Like I didn't have to do anything for 2 months, basically. And then they rolled it out, and it was a big win. It was like big win for retention. Like literally all the numbers went up. So that's another way to talk to users.
Be the user?
No, just like you look at their behaviors, right? Like you're trying to understand what they're using, and it turns out like, oh my gosh, here's how they're behaving, and what does that process look like? And I was like, oh, this is so bad. I can't believe they're dealing with this. You know.
So maybe talking isn't the right verbiage. You know, maybe it's just like get data from users,
get
in whatever fashion. Yeah, get insight. It could be observation. Could be talking to them. Could be reading through their responses.
Notes.
Could be anything.
Get accurate insights. All right, people. Good chat. You did it, Jeff. You pushed it. You pushed through it.
We made it all the way to the end.